Right now, inside your body, a war might be happening that you can't see, can't feel, and that won't show up on a normal checkup for years. Your doctor could tell you your blood sugar is normal. Your last blood test could come back clean. And yet, underneath that normal-looking number, your cells could already be losing a battle they've been fighting since your 20s. Here's the strange part. This isn't rare. It isn't something that only happens to people who eat badly or never exercise. Right now, in the United States alone, more than a third of adults are living with this exact condition, and according to the CDC, more than 8 out of 10 of them have no idea it's happening. Not because they're not paying attention, because the body is remarkably good at hiding it. So today, we're going to walk through 7 signs, some obvious, some so subtle you'd never connect them to your blood sugar, that your body might be sending you right now. And by the end, you'll understand something most people never learn until it's already turned into a diagnosis. But here's the thing, sign number 5 isn't something you'll find on a typical checklist. It's not fatigue, it's not weight gain. It's something that happens in a very specific, very ordinary moment of your day, and once you notice it, you won't be able to unsee it. We'll get there. But first, let's talk about what's actually going on inside your body when insulin stops doing its job. To understand these warning signs, you first need to understand the actor behind the scenes, insulin. Most people think of insulin as the sugar hormone, something that only matters if you're diabetic. But insulin is one of the most powerful hormones in your entire body. It doesn't just manage blood sugar. It tells your cells when to store fat, when to release energy, when to grow, and when to hold back. Think of insulin as a key. Every time you eat, a bowl of cereal, a sandwich, even a piece of fruit, your blood sugar rises, and your pancreas releases insulin to unlock your cells so sugar can move out of your bloodstream and into your muscles, your liver, your fat tissue, where it's either used for energy or stored for later. For most of human history, this system worked beautifully. But somewhere along the way, for many people, without a single symptom they'd notice, the locks on those cells started to change shape. The key still works, technically, but it doesn't turn as smoothly. So your pancreas does the only thing it knows how to do. It makes more keys, more insulin. And for a while, that brute force approach works. Blood sugar stays in the normal range. Your labs look fine. You feel fine. This is what makes insulin resistance so dangerous. It's not a sudden event. It's a slow erosion that can take 5, 10, sometimes 15 years to fully reveal itself. And by the time your fasting blood sugar actually creeps into prediabetic territory, your pancreas has often already been overworking itself for the better part of a decade. So, how does this actually happen at a cellular level? Here's where it gets interesting. And here's where the first real warning sign hides in plain sight. Imagine you're trying to get into your house, and your key works perfectly the first 50 times. But every time you use it forcefully, jamming it in, twisting hard, the lock wears down a little. Eventually, the key barely works at all, and you have to jiggle it, push harder, try again. That's roughly what happens to your cells when they're bombarded, meal after meal, day after day, with large surges of insulin, often from a diet high in refined carbohydrates and sugar, the kind found in soda, white bread, breakfast cereal, and the sugary coffee drinks so many of us grab on the way to work. Research from institutions like Harvard Medical School has pointed out that this isn't purely about how much sugar you eat, it's about the pattern. Constant grazing, frequent snacking, and sugary drinks sipped throughout the day keep insulin elevated almost continuously, giving your cells no break, no window to reset their sensitivity. Now here's your first real warning sign, and it's one almost nobody connects to blood sugar. Energy crashes 1 to 2 hours after eating, not tiredness in general, a specific, sudden crash. You eat lunch, feel fine for 45 minutes, and then it's like someone pulled a plug. Brain fog rolls in. Your eyelids feel heavy. You reach for coffee or something sweet just to function. Most people blame this on just being tired or a big lunch. But that crash is often your body's blood sugar spiking, insulin flooding in to compensate, and then overshooting, dropping your blood sugar lower than where it started. It's called reactive hypoglycemia, and it's one of the earliest fingerprints of a system that's starting to lose its precision. Now let's talk about a myth that gets repeated so often it's practically accepted as fact. Insulin resistance is caused by eating too much sugar. It's not wrong exactly, but it's dangerously incomplete, and this myth causes a lot of people to miss what's actually happening in their own bodies. Here's what the science actually shows. Insulin resistance is influenced by a combination of factors, and sugar is just one piece of a much bigger puzzle. Chronic stress raises cortisol, which independently pushes blood sugar up and can worsen insulin sensitivity, regardless of what you're eating. Poor sleep, even just a handful of nights of 5 or 6 hours instead of 7 or 8, has been shown in research from institutions like the University of Chicago to measurably reduce insulin sensitivity in otherwise healthy people within less than a week. Sitting for long stretches, the kind that happens in almost every office job, reduces how efficiently your muscles pull sugar out of your bloodstream, because muscle contraction itself is one of the most powerful, insulin-independent ways your body clears blood sugar. So, someone could be eating a relatively clean diet, avoiding soda and candy, and still be developing insulin resistance, because they're sleeping 5 hours a night, sitting at a desk for 10 hours a day, and running on cortisol from a stressful job. This is exactly why so many people are blindsided by a prediabetes diagnosis. They were looking for sugar. They weren't looking at sleep, stress, and movement. 3 factors that, according to the Cleveland Clinic, can be just as influential as diet itself. Which brings us to warning sign number 2, one that almost nobody thinks to connect to blood sugar at all. Difficulty concentrating, especially in the afternoon. Your brain runs almost entirely on glucose, and it needs a steady, stable supply, not spikes and crashes. When insulin resistance disrupts that stability, brain fog is often one of the very first symptoms, showing up long before any blood test would flag a problem. Here's where things take an unexpected turn. Most people assume insulin resistance is purely an internal, invisible process, something happening quietly inside your bloodstream, with zero outward signs. But there's a discovery that surprised even researchers when it first came to light. Insulin resistance can show up on your skin. There's a specific pattern called acanthosis nigricans, and while the name sounds intimidating, what it actually looks like is simple. Darkened, slightly velvety patches of skin, most commonly at the back of the neck, in the armpits, or in skin folds. For years, this was dismissed by many as just a cosmetic quirk, something related to skin type or sun exposure. But research has since confirmed that it's often a direct visual marker of elevated insulin levels. Insulin actually stimulating skin cells to grow more than they normally would, creating that darkened, thickened texture. This is our third warning sign: darkened patches of skin, especially on the neck or in skin folds. It's not always obvious, and it's easy to mistake for sun exposure or just your skin tone, which is exactly why it goes unnoticed for so long. But dermatologists and endocrinologists alike consider it one of the more reliable outward signs, precisely because it doesn't lie the way self-reported symptoms like tiredness can. Think about how strange that is for a moment. Your blood test might say everything's normal. Your doctor might not even think to check. And yet, your skin, the largest organ in your body, could already be telling a completely different story. Now, the emotional weight of this starts to build, because here's a fact most people find genuinely unsettling. Insulin resistance doesn't just sit quietly waiting to become diabetes. While it's developing, it's also quietly reshaping other systems in your body, some of them systems you'd never expect. Take your reproductive hormones. In women, insulin resistance is one of the central drivers behind polycystic ovary syndrome, or PCOS, one of the most common hormonal conditions affecting people of reproductive age. Elevated insulin can push the ovaries to produce more testosterone than usual, which can trigger irregular cycles, acne along the jawline, and unexplained hair thinning or excess hair growth. In men, insulin resistance has been linked in multiple studies to lower testosterone levels. because fat tissue, especially visceral fat around the abdomen, actively converts testosterone into estrogen, and insulin resistance tends to accelerate the accumulation of exactly that kind of fat. And this leads us to warning sign number 4, stubborn fat, specifically around the abdomen, that doesn't respond the way you'd expect to diet or exercise. Not fat anywhere on the body, specifically visceral fat, the kind that sits around your organs rather than just under your skin. This type of fat is metabolically active. It doesn't just sit there. It releases inflammatory signals that make insulin resistance worse, creating a feedback loop where the fat and the insulin problem feed each other. This is part of why some people can eat carefully and still struggle to lose weight around their midsection specifically. It's not a willpower problem, it's a hormonal one. The tension here is real, because this is the point where a slow, invisible process starts touching parts of life people care about deeply. Energy, appearance, fertility, hormones. And it raises an obvious question. If the signs are this scattered, this easy to explain away individually, how would anyone ever catch this early? This is where we get to the biggest insight, the one promised back in the open loop. Most people wait for a lab number to tell them something's wrong. But there's a moment, in a very ordinary part of daily life, that often reveals insulin resistance long before any blood test does. And it's this: intense, almost uncontrollable hunger, or cravings, roughly 30 to 90 minutes after a carbohydrate-heavy meal. Not normal hunger 4 hours later, but a sharp, urgent craving shortly after eating, especially for something sweet or starchy. Here's why this happens, and why it's so revealing. When insulin resistance is present, your pancreas often overcompensates by releasing more insulin than a meal actually requires. That excess insulin doesn't just clear the sugar from your last meal. It can drive your blood sugar down below where it started, triggering a physiological hunger response. Your brain, sensing falling blood sugar, sends out urgent hunger signals, often specifically for fast-acting carbohydrates, because that's the quickest way your body knows to raise blood sugar back up. This is the moment most people misread completely. They think, I must have low willpower, or I just love sugar too much. But what's actually happening is a hormonal overcorrection, playing out in real time, roughly an hour after they ate. It's not a character flaw, it's insulin, overshooting. And this is warning sign number 5, the one that connects everything else together, because it explains the energy crashes from section 2, and it explains why cutting calories alone so often fails for people dealing with this. You can't out-discipline a hormonal signal that's telling your brain, quite literally, that your blood sugar is dropping. So what do you actually do with this information? This is where things shift from unsettling to genuinely useful, because unlike a lot of health conditions, insulin resistance is remarkably responsive to changes, often faster than people expect. Warning sign 6 is worth naming here too. Waking up tired even after a full night's sleep. Poor insulin sensitivity has been linked to disrupted deep sleep cycles, meaning even 7 or 8 hours can leave you feeling like you barely slept. And warning sign 7, often the most overlooked, is increased thirst and more frequent trips to the bathroom, especially at night, a subtle sign that your kidneys are working harder to manage slightly elevated blood sugar, long before it reaches diabetic levels. Now, for the practical part. The single most effective tool, according to research summarized by the Mayo Clinic, isn't a supplement or a specific diet trend. It's muscle movement, particularly after meals. Something as simple as a 10 to 15-minute walk after eating has been shown to meaningfully reduce the blood sugar spike from that meal, because contracting muscles pull glucose out of the bloodstream without needing much insulin at all. Protein and fiber at the start of a meal, rather than starting with the bread basket or the pasta, slow the rate at which sugar enters your bloodstream, softening the insulin spike that follows. Prioritizing 7 to 8 hours of consistent sleep isn't a soft suggestion. Multiple studies show measurable improvements in insulin sensitivity within days of correcting sleep debt. And managing chronic stress, even something as simple as short breathing breaks during a stressful workday, lowers cortisol's interference with blood sugar regulation. None of this requires a complete life overhaul overnight. Small, consistent changes, applied in the right places, are what actually move the needle here. Here's the biggest lesson in all of this. Insulin resistance isn't a switch that flips on one day. It's a conversation your body has been quietly having with itself for years. Through afternoon energy crashes, through skin changes, through cravings you assumed were just cravings, through stubborn fat that never seemed to make sense. Every one of those 7 signs is your body speaking a language most of us were never taught to understand. The reassuring part is this: because it develops slowly, it can also be caught early and reversed, long before it ever needs a diagnosis to get your attention. The real skill isn't waiting for a lab result to tell you something's wrong. It's learning to notice what your body has been telling you all along.